Amma's story begins on a quiet evening in the city when the moonlight gently starts to spread across the empty streets. The city's hustle and bustle seem miles away as a different world exists here in the shadows. Amma, a young girl with worn-out clothes and damp hair, walks through the streets searching for a place to rest for the night. Her eyes hold a certain spark that tells a story of resilience and hope despite the struggles she faces every day. She is no stranger to hardship and has learned to survive in a world that doesn't always show kindness to people like her. She didn't always live like this, but a few years ago her life was different. She used to have a home, a small house in a busy neighborhood with her parents who loved her dearly. But things changed when conflict began to take over their lives. Her parents couldn't handle the pressures of life, and Amma saw her mother's anxiety growing with every passing day. It became too much for her to bear, and one day, without any warning, she left her home. She walked away from everything she knew in search of a life she thought she could control. It was a decision that led her to the streets. Now, her days were spent searching for shelter, food, and safety. Every morning, she woke up not knowing where her next meal would come from or where she would sleep at night. She wandered from street corner to street corner, hoping someone would offer help, but most days, people ignored her or looked the other way. She learned quickly not to trust anyone. Sometimes, she managed to get some food from a local food stall, or a kind stranger would offer her something to drink. Other times, she spent the night on a bench in a park wrapped in layers of old newspapers and cardboard. It was a life filled with uncertainty, but also one that had made her strong. Amma had no choice but to adapt to this world where survival was a constant battle. Yet, no matter how tough things got, her spirit never wavered. She refused to let the world define her. Every day, she woke up with a glimmer of hope in her heart, determined to keep moving forward, even if the road was rough. Her past had shaped her, but it would not break her. She knew one thing for sure: she was still alive, and she had the strength to keep going. Kwame was a man of wealth and influence, living a life that most could only dream of. As a successful businessman in the city, he owned several companies and had a reputation for being a powerful figure in the high society circles. His office was on the top floor of a shiny skyscraper, and his days were filled with meetings, deals, and luxury. But despite all his riches, there was a deep emptiness within him that not many knew about. Beneath his polished exterior and expensive suits, Kwame carried his own hidden pain, a past full of loss, regret, and unhealed wounds. He had built his empire to escape the ghosts of his past, but the more he succeeded, the more he felt disconnected from the world around him. He rarely allowed anyone to get close, and his heart remained guarded, locked away behind walls of wealth and status. One day, as Kwame was driving through the city, he happened to pass by a narrow street where the shadows of evening were falling. It was a part of the city he rarely ventured into, but something made him slow down. His eyes caught sight of Amma sitting on a small step, her face worn but strong, her eyes staring into the distance as if waiting for something or someone. Her presence intrigued him. He could see the exhaustion in her posture, the worn clothes, and the way she seemed to belong to the streets, yet there was something about her resilience that stopped him in his tracks. Kwame parked his car a few meters away and watched her for a moment. He didn't know why, but he felt an urge to speak to her. Maybe it was the way she looked so calm, so composed despite her circumstances. Maybe it was the fire in her eyes that mirrored something he once had but had lost long ago. He walked over to her slowly, trying not to appear imposing. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, his voice soft but firm. Amma looked up, her face initially wary, but when she saw that he wasn't like the others who simply passed by without a second glance, her guard softened slightly. She nodded, not saying much at first. The conversation was brief, just a few words exchanged. He asked her name, and she replied with a quiet Amma. He asked if she needed help, but Amma hesitated. She was used to people offering help with hidden motives or without really caring. She wasn't sure if he was different. Kwame noticed her reluctance, but something in her demeanor told him that she wasn't like others he had met. There was an authenticity in her, a rawness that most people had long lost in the pursuit of wealth or status. It intrigued him. It was rare to meet someone like her, someone who wasn't driven by material desires, someone who seemed to have an inner strength, a quiet dignity that made her stand out even in the harshest conditions. He didn't push further. After a few moments, he gave her a nod and a small smile before walking back to his car. But as he drove away, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something about Amma that he needed to understand. She had awakened something within him, something he hadn't felt in years. A curiosity. An interest. Maybe even a need to help her, not out of pity, but because he felt a strange connection to her resilience, to the fire that burned within her, despite all odds. It was a fleeting encounter, but one that left an impact on both of them. Kwame was already planning in his mind how he could learn more about this girl, how he could offer her help without revealing his identity. He didn't want to give her charity, that wasn't his intention. He wanted to know her, to understand her strength. And Amma, though unsure of his true intentions, couldn't deny that something about this man felt different. His eyes held a depth she hadn't seen before, and for a moment, she wondered if he was someone who could offer more than just the empty promises she had come to expect from others. After their brief encounter, Kwame couldn't shake the feeling that Amma was different from anyone he had ever met. There was something in her eyes, in the way she carried herself despite the harshness of her life, that struck a chord deep within him. He knew he couldn't just walk away from her and pretend that he hadn't seen her. But Kwame was careful. He didn't want to approach her in a way that would make her feel like a charity case or like she was being judged for her circumstances. He wanted to offer her help, but he wanted to do it in a way that would not only preserve her dignity but also allow her to prove something to herself. Kwame decided that he would reach out to her again, but this time, he would not show her the wealth or status that defined him. He didn't want her to see him as someone who was offering help because of his position. He wasn't interested in impressing her with his success, he was interested in understanding her. Amma had shown incredible strength in her life, surviving on her own, and Kwame admired that. But he also believed that she had untapped potential, and he wanted to give her an opportunity to grow without the pressure of his wealth hanging over her. He started by looking for ways to approach her again, hoping their paths would cross. A few days later, he found her once more sitting on the same corner, her expression as composed as it had been the first time. This time, Kwame didn't hesitate. He walked straight up to her with a friendly smile, making sure to keep his distance to avoid intimidating her. "Hi, Amma," he said, his voice calm but warm. "I've been thinking about you." Amma looked up at him, cautious. She hadn't expected him to return, and she wasn't sure how to react. His eyes seemed sincere, but she had learned the hard way not to trust people too easily. She had seen too many who offered help with hidden motives, and she didn't want to fall into that trap. "I was wondering," Kwame continued, "if you'd be interested in working for me. I run a small business, and I could use someone who's dependable, someone who has a strong character like you." Amma raised an eyebrow, the suspicion evident on her face. "Why me?" she asked bluntly. "What do you want in return?" Kwame paused, not taken aback by her directness. He appreciated it. "I don't want anything from you," he said honestly. "I simply believe you have potential, and I want to give you an opportunity. No strings attached." Amma studied him for a long moment, unsure of what to make of his words. She had heard similar promises before, but they had always turned out to be empty. People who offered help often expected something in return. She was used to being let down, and the idea of trusting someone again was a difficult one. Kwame sensed her hesitation, but he remained patient. "I understand if you don't trust me right away," he said, "but just think about it. No pressure. Just a job, and a chance to get off the streets for a while." Amma looked at him, torn between doubt and curiosity. It wasn't that she didn't want the opportunity, it was that she couldn't afford to let her guard down. But as she looked into his eyes, something in him felt different from all the other people who had crossed her path. He wasn't pushing her. He wasn't trying to manipulate her into anything. Maybe he really was offering her a chance, without expecting anything in return. "All right," she said finally, her voice reluctant but sincere. "I'll take the job." Kwame smiled, relieved. He didn't expect her to jump at the offer, but he was glad she hadn't completely rejected him. "And I also have a small place you can stay in temporarily, just until you get back on your feet," he added casually. "It's nothing fancy, just a little apartment in the city. It's safe, and you'll have your own space." Amma's eyes narrowed slightly. And why would you do that? She asked again, this time more softly. What's your real reason? Kwame shrugged. I just think everyone deserves a second chance. And I believe you've earned one. Alma didn't fully trust him, but the offer was hard to ignore. She had nowhere else to go, and even though she still felt wary, she knew she needed a place to stay. A job, even if it was temporary, could change her circumstances. Fine, she said, her voice steady, though her mind still raced with doubt. I'll take it. But I don't need any special treatment. Kwame nodded. Of course. I just want to give you the tools to help yourself, nothing more. We'll start fresh. No strings attached. As he turned to leave, Alma watched him for a moment longer. She didn't know whether she had just made the right choice, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope. She didn't fully trust Kwame yet, but she was willing to take a chance. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the beginning of something better. Alma's life began to shift the moment she started working with Kwame. At first, she wasn't sure what to expect. The job was simple enough, helping with administrative tasks in his small office, organizing files, answering calls. But it wasn't the work itself that was changing her, it was the environment. She had never been in a place like this before, a clean, organized office, the scent of fresh coffee in the air, and a sense of calm that she had never known. She had grown accustomed to the noise of the streets, the unpredictable hustle of life, but here, everything was different. The subtle luxury that surrounded her, the comfortable chairs, the well-kept building, was unlike anything she had ever experienced. For the first time, Alma felt what it was like to have a routine, a sense of purpose, and a place to go every day. She had her own desk now, her own space where she could think, organize, and work. Small things, like having a hot meal during lunch or a coffee break, made her realize how little she had allowed herself to feel comfortable before. For so long, she had simply survived, now, she was living. The luxury wasn't just in the things around her but in the peace that came with having a place of stability. But while the luxury was nice, Alma remained humble. She wasn't used to being treated this way, and it made her feel both grateful and uncomfortable. She never let herself forget where she came from, and that kept her grounded. She didn't want to get used to this life because deep down, she feared losing it. As her life began to change, so did Alma's internal world. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. This kindness, this sudden change in her circumstances, was it real? Was Kwame really helping her without any hidden motive? Part of her wanted to believe that this was her chance to move forward, but another part of her felt that she didn't deserve this life. She'd spent so long surviving in a world that had little mercy, and now, she found herself in a place where people were genuinely kind to her. It felt like a dream, and with dreams came the fear of waking up to disappointment. Her mind began to spiral with doubts. Was Kwame's kindness truly selfless, or was he expecting something in return? Perhaps he was just playing some game, testing her in ways she didn't understand. She began to question herself, am I worthy of this? She felt the weight of her past, her struggles, and it made her question whether someone like her could ever truly fit into this new life. She started pulling away a little, unsure of whether to trust Kwame completely. He treated her well, but she didn't know if that was just his way of feeling good about helping her or if there was a deeper reason she couldn't yet see. Kwame, however, never forced her to open up or change too quickly. He noticed the discomfort in her, but he didn't pressure her. Instead, he focused on guiding her in subtle ways. He didn't flaunt his wealth or use it to dominate the relationship. Instead, he became a mentor, a quiet presence in her life, teaching her lessons that would change her forever. Kwame often spoke about things that had nothing to do with money or status. He shared his own experiences about failure and success, emphasizing that true success was never about material gain but about the mindset and character that you built along the way. He taught her that happiness wasn't found in what you had, but in how you saw the world and your place in it. Success is not just about where you get to, he would say, but how you carry yourself along the way. Alma listened closely to these words, and though she wasn't sure at first, they began to resonate with her. The more Kwame shared, the more she realized that he wasn't just teaching her about business or skills, but about life itself. He spoke about resilience, about finding joy in the smallest things, and about the importance of giving and receiving respect in all relationships. With each passing day, Amma's perspective began to shift. She stopped thinking of herself as someone unworthy of good things, and instead, she started to believe that she was capable of much more than she had ever imagined. The lessons Kwame shared with her were not just about practical skills, they were about changing the way she saw herself and her future. Slowly, Amma was beginning to see that her worth wasn't determined by her past or her circumstances. She was learning to value herself in ways she never had before. Through Kwame's subtle guidance, Amma's transformation began. She wasn't just learning how to succeed in a job, she was learning how to succeed in life. The fear of unworthiness, while still there, started to fade as she recognized her own strength and the possibilities ahead. With each step, she became a little more confident, a little more sure of herself. And though she still had doubts and fears, she was beginning to realize that she deserved this second chance, and she was ready to embrace it. Amma's life had been slowly shifting, and she was starting to feel like she was becoming the person she always wanted to be: strong, capable, and in control of her own fate. Yet, just when she thought she was settling into this new rhythm, everything changed in an instant. It all started one afternoon when Amma was running an errand for Kwame. She had been working for him for several months now, and during that time, she had come to trust him more and more, even though she still kept a part of herself closed off. She was still uncertain about his true intentions, but she felt she was growing into someone better under his mentorship. However, on this particular day, everything she thought she knew about him would be thrown into question. As she entered a cafe to pick up lunch for the office, she overheard a conversation at a nearby table. It was a group of well-dressed people, speaking in tones that carried the unmistakable air of high society. The name that caught her attention was Kwame's. They were talking about him, about his latest business ventures, his wealth, and his influence in the city. Amma's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't thought much about it before, but now it all clicked into place. The subtle hints, the ways he had always seemed to have everything under control, his absence from certain social situations, the manner in which he treated her, it was all starting to make sense. Kwame wasn't just a kind businessman trying to help a young girl off the streets. He was a wealthy entrepreneur, part of the very elite society that she had always been distant from. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. How had she not seen it? How had she allowed herself to be so blind? The truth of his identity made her feel small, foolish, and betrayed. She had trusted him, let him into her life, opened her heart, all without ever knowing who he really was. And now, with this discovery, she questioned everything. Amma couldn't concentrate on the rest of the day. Her mind was racing with thoughts and doubts. Did he help me out of kindness, or was it just because he saw me as a charity case? Was I just a project for him? Why didn't he tell me the truth? These thoughts consumed her, and for the first time in months, she found herself feeling lost again, like the girl on the streets who couldn't trust anyone. That evening, when she returned to Kwame's apartment to drop off the food, she couldn't hold it in any longer. She confronted him, her voice trembling with a mixture of confusion and hurt. "I know who you are," she said, her eyes not meeting his. "You're not just some businessman trying to help me out. You're rich. You're one of the most powerful people in the city. Why didn't you tell me?" Kwame looked at her with a mix of surprise and understanding. He had been waiting for this moment, knowing that eventually, Amma would find out. He had never intended to hide his identity forever, but he had hoped that Amma would see him for who he was as a person, not for his wealth. He had never wanted her to feel like she was only being helped because of his status. "Amma," he began softly, "I didn't want to lie to you. I never planned to keep it from you forever, but I didn't want my wealth to define the way you saw me, or the way you saw yourself. I didn't want you to think that I was helping you out of pity, or that I was some rich man playing a good Samaritan. I wanted you to know that I believe in you, in your strength, and in your potential. Not because of your past, but because of who you are now." Alma stood frozen, her chest tight with emotions. She couldn't understand it. "But why?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Why did you go through all this trouble for me? I'm just a homeless girl. I never asked for your help. I never asked for your charity." Kwame took a deep breath, his eyes softening. "It's not charity, Amma. I didn't see you as just a homeless girl. I saw a person who had been through more than anyone should ever have to, but who still carried on with strength and resilience. I saw someone who had the potential to do great things, not because of what you have, but because of who you are. You have qualities that no amount of money can buy. And that's why I wanted to help you. Not because I could, but because I saw something in you that reminded me of myself when I was younger, someone with dreams, with hopes, but who needed a little guidance to reach them. Alma's heart pounded in her chest. His words were kind, but she still felt the sting of betrayal. She had spent so long trying to make it on her own, relying on no one, and now, she felt like everything she had built, the trust, the progress, was crumbling. She looked at Kwame, her eyes filled with hurt. I don't know if I can believe you, she whispered. I don't know if I can trust you anymore. Kwame stepped closer, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. I understand why you feel that way. I never wanted to hurt you, Alma. I just wanted to show you that your value isn't tied to your circumstances. You've always been worthy of better, but you needed to believe it for yourself. You've already begun that journey. And I wanted to help you along the way, but only because I believe in you, not because of my wealth. Alma looked at him, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Part of her wanted to believe him, to trust that he truly cared for her as a person. But another part of her felt that the distance between them had just grown too wide. She didn't know if she could close the gap. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I need some time. Kwame nodded, understanding her need for space. Take all the time you need, Alma. I'm not going anywhere. But no matter what, I'm proud of you. I'll always be here for you, as a friend, as a mentor. You're not alone in this. As Alma turned to leave, she felt the weight of the truth settle in. She didn't have all the answers yet, and her heart was still conflicted. But one thing was clear, Kwame wasn't just some rich man trying to save her, he was someone who saw her for who she truly was, and that was something she would need to figure out how to accept. After a period of reflection, Alma begins to understand the true value of what Kwame had offered her. She realizes that his help was never about his wealth or status, but about believing in her potential. The pain of her initial betrayal fades, and her trust in him deepens as she sees that his intentions were always sincere. As she grows, Alma starts to gain confidence in herself. She begins to make decisions for her future, focusing on her own passions and dreams. The fear and doubt that once held her back start to disappear, replaced by a sense of purpose. She explores career opportunities that align with her interests, embracing the chance to build something of her own. Kwame continues to be there for her, but he steps back, allowing Alma the space to grow independently. He's no longer just a benefactor, he's a mentor and a friend, guiding her with wisdom but respecting her autonomy. Alma's transformation is not just about changing her circumstances, but about discovering her own strength and potential. With Kwame's support, she steps into a new chapter of her life, ready to shape her own future. By the end of the story, Alma has fully transformed into a confident, self-assured woman, no longer defined by her past struggles but by her resilience and strength. She has carved out a path for herself, thriving in a career that excites her and finding fulfillment in her newfound independence. Her relationship with Kwame evolves into a deep and meaningful friendship built on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. While there are subtle hints of romance, the focus remains on their emotional connection and the way they support each other. Kwame has become more than a mentor, he is now a true friend who has helped Alma find her own voice. The story concludes with a powerful message about the transformative power of kindness, mentorship, and believing in someone's potential. Through Kwame's support, Alma's life is forever changed, proving that with the right guidance and a little faith, anyone can rewrite their story and create a future of their own choosing.